Welcome to the Print Political Adda. I am Sourav Barman. In this very special episode, on a day Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah is becoming Karnataka's longest service CM, and we'll have a discussion around that, and we'll also bring in other aspects. We'll talk about the BJP, the RSS, and the Congress party's current situation nationally, and I have my colleague Sharan Poovanna joining this conversation from Karnataka, and we have Professor James Manor joining us from London. Welcome, Professor Manor.
Thank you.
I'll hand over the mic to Sharan now. You can lob the first question.
Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Sir, for starters, Siddaramaiah, by duration of time, is now the longest serving chief minister in Karnataka. Considering Karnataka is known for its political volatility, very few chief ministers have actually achieved a feat of completing a full term. Siddaramaiah's achievements, what does it signify?
Well, I think he has developed a strategy of assisting the disadvantaged groups in Karnataka society, OBCs, Dalits, Muslims, and others, but he has done that in partnership with the deputy chief minister, who is a Wakalaga, and who the Wakalagas are a traditionally dominant landowning group in Karnataka. Mr. Siddaramaiah also has some Lingayat support, Lingayats being the other traditionally dominant landed group. And there have been difficulties, complications, tensions between the disadvantaged groups in his coalition of support and the Wakalagas, but the leadership of the Congress in the state has minimized the conflicts somewhat. There have been tensions, but the alliance is held together. And this combination of disadvantaged groups plus some Wakalaga support, this combination is powerful numerically, so that winning elections becomes possible. I should add, however, that no chief minister, no Karnataka government since 1985 has been re-elected. Every government has been thrown out by the voters, who are impatient and highly sophisticated. So it's not so easy to get re-elected, but Mr. Siddaramaiah has been elected on more than one occasion in Karnataka, and that means that he's been able to hold power for the longest period of any chief minister. He has achieved some good things for his coalition, and I think for the people of Karnataka, but getting re-elected is always difficult there. This is Mr. Siddaramaiah's approach to politics is somewhat similar to the the strategy developed by D.Devaraj Urs in the 1970s, who changed politics dramatically in Karnataka. But there are these differences with the alliance with a deputy chief minister who is a Wakalaga.
So, you speak of, D.Devaraj Urs at the time mobilizing the support of disadvantaged groups, which Siddaramaiah seems to emulate. But are there differences in the way they went about mobilizing support from these marginalized groups, and how effective have both been in their own, eras?
There are clear differences, partly because D.Devaraj Urs was operating in a different historical era. When he took power as chief minister in 1972, he was the first non-Wakalaga, non-Lingayat chief minister in the state. Those two groups had dominated state politics fairly substantially until 72. They inevitably wanted to get rid of D.Devaraj Urs and replace him with one of their own people. And in order to stay in power, he had to mobilize rather unmobilized disadvantaged groups, that is to say, the backward classes, the Muslims, and the Dalits in particular, also scheduled tribes, although scheduled tribes do not have great numerical strength in Karnataka. And D.Devaraj Urs developed, first of all, helped those groups to organize themselves by funding caste associations, by bringing talented young legislators from those groups into the cabinet, many of whom turned out to be extremely skilled and later became chief ministers themselves in many cases. So D.Devaraj Urs had to create organizations amongst the disadvantaged groups. He had to bring them together, and he had to develop programs such as his land reform program and other programs favoring the disadvantaged groups in order to create the beginnings of an intercaste alliance among them. Now, Mr. Siddaramaiah, when he took over as chief minister much later, those groups had become quite well organized. Alliances between them had become possible, but in some cases difficult because of rivalries within that coalition. But D.Devaraj Urs, in a sense, had to start from scratch, from square one. Siddaramaiah entered politics at a time when those groups were much better organized, had a much clearer picture of their own interests, so Siddaramaiah's task, in a sense, was easier than that of D.Devaraj Urs, who had to really create things from nothing.
Okay, so you mentioned the land reforms. Now, at the time, this was revolutionary, yes, but did it also help create a constituency of support for D.Devaraj Urs? And how do you think Siddaramaiah has taken this forward as a political instrument, sir?
Well, D.Devaraj Urs's land reforms were significant, but I would not say they were revolutionary. They basically involved the abolition of tenancy. They helped tenants, that is to say, people in the lower middle range of the economic hierarchy. They did not help landless people. Tackling landlessness has always been difficult in every Indian state, and it was certainly difficult for him. But those people who gained lands from the significant but limited land reform of D.Devaraj Urs, they certainly supported him, and he also, as I say, found bright young leaders from those groups who could bring their people behind them into support for D.Devaraj Urs. So land reform was extremely helpful, but it did not suffice. It was not enough on its own. Now, Siddaramaiah comes to power in a very different era, where you have a lot of competition amongst disadvantaged groups and other groups for benefits from government and for policies that will help them economically and socially, educationally. And so his task has been rather different from D.Devaraj Urs. And Siddaramaiah's emphasis has to some extent been on welfare programs for women, for young people, for different disadvantaged groups, programs which deliver very specifically deliver goods and services to these people in a way that D.Devaraj Urs was never able to undertake. So the groups to which Siddaramaiah wants to appeal are similar to those of D.Devaraj Urs, but the methods used to reach them and to help them are now quite different.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just a small question about Siddaramaiah's political resilience. Now, this story of Siddaramaiah becoming Karnataka's longest-serving chief minister is also a story of remarkable political resilience as a politician. So, what do you make of Siddaramaiah as a politician? Purely, if you focus on that, since you have tracked him over decades.
Siddaramaiah is extremely skilled. He's an extremely intelligent person, by the way, and he's extremely skilled at making alliances, at preventing alliances from breaking down, and at developing government programs in detail, which do make a difference. To give you one example, when the other political parties were in power, when Siddaramaiah was a leading figure in the opposition in Karnataka, when other governments, especially the BJP governments under Mr. Yediyurappa, would present their budget each year, Siddaramaiah would be the leader from his party, who responded to the budget. And Siddaramaiah has an extremely fine brain, in an analytical brain, able to organize, to analyze numerical issues, economic issues. And so when Siddaramaiah would stand up to respond to the government's budget, he would give a long and detailed dissection of the budget, and ministers in the government would sit carefully making notes when Siddaramaiah would speak, so that they could get a complete picture of their own budget. He's an extremely intelligent person who has a manner about him which appeals to a lot of people. He does not appear to be arrogant, and he can reach out to people in different social groups, especially the disadvantaged, with great skill. So I think his capacity as a leader, in those capacities, have enabled him to remain chief minister for so long.
Okay. So, in your, since you've covered both the era when Urs was initiating or ushering these reforms, and you've seen the evolution of Siddaramaiah as finance minister and all of that, how do you think the idea of welfare has evolved in Karnataka, especially, sir? And how do you see that, sort of panning out in today's India?
Well, welfarism, the provision of goods and services and funds to ordinary people, has become a major theme in India and in Karnataka, especially since about 2003. In 2003 or so, we began for the first time to see the economic reforms which Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh introduced in the 90s. We began to see them bearing fruit for governments. That is to say, revenues from the economy took off in 2003, and suddenly state governments and the government of India had a lot more resources to use for whatever they liked. And those resources increasingly since then, since the resources have been available, chief ministers and prime ministers have been able to use a lot of those resources for funding welfare programs. Siddaramaiah has had his own rather clever innovations in delivering funds, goods, services to poor people especially, but also to others, and has increasingly used information technology as a means of delivering those goods and services and funds. And so it's a change in the amount of money available to a state government, and a change in the information technology tools for delivering such things have enabled Siddaramaiah, as well as governments in other states and the government of India, to develop new and precise means of delivering welfare to people. Siddaramaiah has also been clever about labeling some of his programs in ways that are appealing to the voters and remind the voters that it's the Congress Party which is doing the delivery. The government of India under Mr. Modi has also obviously developed massive new welfare provisions, and those are delivered increasingly through information technology systems, so that middlemen between the government and the ordinary person is kind of marginalized, and that money can be delivered direct to voters. Siddaramaiah has used similar methods as well, because Karnataka obviously is not short of skill when it comes to information technology. This is a completely different game from the way that Devaraj Urs could proceed. He didn't have a lot of extra funds, and he certainly didn't have sophisticated information technology to help him.
So this is where I'll come in. You just spoke about Siddaramaiah's welfare politics and how the emergence of newer tools has helped him really deliver on those promises and reaching the last percent. But in terms of shaping a real ideological counter narrative to the BJP and RSS, has he really succeeded in doing that, or is he seen as merely as a politician who distributes freebies or whatever welfare schemes, a person who delivers?
Well, I think he's much more than a person who just delivers, and in a way, there is ideological content in Siddaramaiah's programs. First of all, he's reaching out to the scheduled castes, the OBCs, and the Muslims with programs targeted to help them. But Siddaramaiah is also representing a kind of enlightened Congress secular approach to politics, to governing, and in a way, he has been helped by the BJP, because under the last Yediyurappa government that preceded this Congress government, the BJP adopted a very hardline, polarizing campaign to increase distance and increase suspicion and distrust between Muslims and others in Karnataka. It was done in a very aggressive manner. The attempt was made by an RSS man imposed on the Yediyurappa government, somewhat against Yediyurappa's desires. He was imposed in ways to promote this hardline Hindutva, in the hope that Karnataka could be polarized and made into a place like Uttar Pradesh or Gujarat. This attempt by the BJP failed. The people of Karnataka at the last state election voted strongly in favor of Congress, gave it a much bigger victory than expected, and bigger victory than it has had in the past, partly because the people of most of the voters of Karnataka were alienated by this hardline approach by the BJP. Siddaramaiah comes to power. He adopts a much more secular approach to politics, and the contrast between BJP in Karnataka and the Congress in Karnataka was clearer and remains clearer because of that strange hardline attempt by the BJP, which was unwise and failed. So I think, in a sense, there is a kind of ideological identity to this government in Karnataka, partly because of its more secular approach and the contrast with the last government, and partly because of the use of a Devaraj Urs-like strategy in reaching out to disadvantaged groups.
So, I mean, you have tracked Siddaramaiah, from his days in 1983. And how do you see him evolving? So, do you see him as the same person? I don't know when you last met him, but do you see him as the same person? How do you think he's changed since then? Or what has been the influence that has changed him since the time he entered the assembly in 1983 to when you last met him?
Well, I think he has matured as a politician. There were times when he would operate in a more carefree manner than was probably advisable. There was one occasion, for example, where he was on a campaign bus, and he was eating some kind of fruit or vegetable, just as the bus pulled up to a meeting. He was about to step off the bus, or this is early in his time as a senior leader. He was about to step off the bus with the remains of the fruit still on his face. And he thought this was, at the time, he thought this was a good idea because it made him look rustic. It made him look like an ordinary man. There was on that bus a senior Karnataka journalist, a person with great good sense, who said to Siddaramaiah, "Look, sir, you really cannot go out there with that stuff on your face. You have to remove that in order to project a sense of a little more dignity or something. You're not just a man off the street. You're now a leader." Siddaramaiah thought about it. He wiped the food off his face, stepped off the bus, and gave his speech successfully. Siddaramaiah early on was a little bit rash and carefree in his actions. I think he's become much more calculating and, in a sense, projects a more dignified appearance without seeming snooty or distant or aloof. He's still a man of the people, but perhaps without fruit on his face. This kind of, I think he's matured in that sense. And he's also had to learn under the present government how to negotiate very delicate relations with his deputy chief minister, Mr. Shivakumar, and with the Wakala and to some extent Lingayat interests that back Shivakumar. So he's had to become a compromiser and a diplomat within the ruling party, but also in his dealings with the people. I think he's matured without becoming stuffy and unresponsive.
So, do all of these qualities, him taking on the BJP, him taking on the RSS, speaking the language of social justice, irrespective of how much he's able to deliver on that front, do all of these things then make it harder for the present high command to replace him with a D.K. Shivakumar, who, like you said, comes from the Vokaliga background, and here you have an OBC chief minister, so does it make it that much harder for the high command to find a replacement for him or even consider replacing him?
Yes, I think it does. I think the high command would be very unwise to step in and dislodge Siddaramaiah. Shivakumar is there. He's an alternative chief minister. He's a man with ambitions naturally. But if and Shivakumar might be a very good chief minister, but if the high command stepped in and moved Siddaramaiah aside, and if indeed they could persuade the assembly to support this idea, I think they would be basically placing the survival of their government at risk, because the unity in this very delicate relationship between Shivakumar and Siddaramaiah, this delicate relationship, if it were broken by people from the high command, then I think there's a serious risk that the government itself would come apart in due course. See, the high command doesn't have many states in which its party is relatively firmly in power after a good election result, and I think they really they need to be cautious, and sometimes they are cautious, but not always.
So if we consider this alternative scenario where Siddaramaiah did not keep himself confined to the politics of Karnataka and tried to emerge as a national leader and to have himself a hand himself a national role, how successful would have been Siddaramaiah as a politician with a national role, with a more national role?
We don't really know the answer to this question. It's not unusual for chief ministers who are successful to think of themselves in national roles. I'm not sure Mr. Siddaramaiah has that idea in his head, but he should probably, if he's thinking along those lines, he should probably consider first that chief ministers of states who have tried to move to the national level and take significant power have largely failed. That's the first thing he should worry about. And if he sought to project himself as a national leader, the high command itself would, particularly Rahul Gandhi and his close associates, would be alarmed and would, I think, react negatively. So I think Mr. Siddaramaiah, he's a realistic man, and I think he would probably see that the chances of success moving beyond Karnataka into national role, the chances of success would not be that great.
But you feel the Congress stands to gain more by using him nationally, considering he's the party's biggest OBC face, and at a time BJP is really going ahead with its OBC-centered politics.
Well, certainly in a national campaign, election campaign, Mr. Siddaramaiah would be a good campaigner beyond Karnataka in attracting OBC support. That I think would not be enough to give him the leading role at the national level, but that's certainly there. But he's not a man who's very well known outside South India, and I'm not sure how much he can contribute nationally, even though he would be a reasonably effective leader in such a role.
So one of the criticisms, or rather, let me ask you, Urs was known as a party builder. I mean, every opportunity he created by building an organization, he empowered them. But one of the criticisms against Siddaramaiah is he's an administrator, a politician. But what is his contribution to the party? Yes, to the government, he's an administrator. He's been very efficient and many other attributes. But his contribution to the party when compared to Urs? Or the building of
D.Devaraj Urs had to create the Congress Party, the version of the Congress Party owing allegiance to Indira Gandhi from nothing. D.Devaraj Urs once told me that when he was made the leader of the Congress Party by Mrs. Gandhi, even before he became chief minister, he said, all I had was a board, a signboard outside my office saying Congress I or Congress Party headquarters. There was I had no support. I had to go out and find people from different social backgrounds, especially disadvantaged groups, to join my group. And so he had to start from nothing and create an organization, and he was very, very shrewd at doing so. He knew that he had to give these people that he was pulling in significant influence, that he had to deliver things to the groups from which they came. So he was, D.Devaraj Urs really had to be a huge organization builder, institution builder for the Congress. Now, when Siddaramaiah becomes the leader of the Congress in Karnataka, he already has around him a number of very good people in the Congress Party. There are in the state cabinet today, to my certain knowledge, there are very, very good ministers. One or two in particular are extremely impressive people by any standard. So Siddaramaiah, in a way, didn't have to create the Congress organization. He had to develop it as best he could to bring new people forward into it. But there was a kind of structure there already. And the Congress in Karnataka is a much more healthy institution organization than the Congress in many other states, which in some states is really embarrassingly poor. So Siddaramaiah, in a sense, had to maintain and build up his organization. He didn't have to create it from nothing. And so being an administrator is not necessarily a bad thing for a chief minister in that party. And as I said before, this is an extremely intelligent man, and he is a shrewd and perceptive chief minister. There have been criticisms, by the way, that sometimes he surrounds himself with too many people who are his personal people who he trusts personally, sometimes people from his own social background. Some of that complaint has been there. But in general, I think he has been fairly successful at sustaining and enhancing Congress.
So apart from being an authority on Karnataka politics, you have also written extensively on BJP RSS relations. And late last year, you wrote about this growing friction between the BJP and the RSS over the appointment of the next BJP chief. And there was a lot of uncertainty. And we had reports of a growing rift between Mr. Modi and Mr. Bhagwat. Now that we have Nitin Naveen as the next BJP president who is going to succeed JP Nadda, so how do you read the situation now? Do you think Modi and Shah have prevailed in having their say?
I'm not sure I would use those words. I think what has happened in the last 4 to 6 months has been a kind of truce between the prime minister and Amit Shah and his people and the RSS on the other hand. They now have agreed on a president for the BJP, which is I suppose a sign that peace has begun to break out in this division between the RSS on the one side, Modi and his people on the other side. But many of the problems which created the split between these two remain. Mr. Modi remains insistent upon utterly dominating and controlling the government. He insists on doing things which the RSS is not entirely happy with. The very fact that one man, you have in India something like one-man government at the top, this itself is offensive to the RSS. They don't like individuals, never have liked individuals in dominating things. They want institutions, especially the institution of the RSS itself, but they want institutions in government. They don't want individuals like this, and they don't want individuals who, for example, claim to be of divine origin, which Mr. Modi has claimed, and he actually, I think, believes that he is of divine origin. These things and Modi's uncompromising ways as prime minister remain significant irritants to the RSS. There is a truce, there's a kind of rapprochement, as the French say, a rebuilding of some minimal understanding, but the basic problems remain, and this could become a severe threat to Modi's own base because the RSS is important in maintaining that.
So in Siddaramaiah's case, has he been successful in his take against Modi? Yes, he has been attacking the BJP and RSS, but he's also someone who has rallied at least, the southern states on issues like anti-Hindi imposition, the lowering share in devolution of taxes. So has he, in a sense, taken over the role of a leader of opposition from, say, Karnataka? Has he taken on Modi effectively on those lines, sir?
Well, it's difficult to succeed against Modi in these areas because Modi has acquired such power as the kind of power through which he can exercise personal rule, and it's very difficult for any state level leader or any group of state level leaders to stop that, to limit Modi's successes, especially in terms of the division of funding, which you mentioned, between the state and the center. And the center continues to tighten the screws on state governments and to limit their financial resources by taking more powers and resources to the center. And so it's very difficult to check Mr. Modi on that front. The state governments in Tamil Nadu and Kerala are not very happy with the BJP government in New Delhi, especially the Tamil Nadu government, so that you have, and to some extent, there are similar resentments even in Andhra. Even though Chandrababu Naidu is an ally of the Prime Minister, but it's very difficult for the things that irritate the government of Kerala and the government of Tamil Nadu are different from the things that irritate the government of Karnataka, and so it's very difficult to develop any kind of southern force that could somehow make a difference in center-state relations with this extremely over-centralized government of India.
I'll ask this last question, but it's not more a question than for you to share your experiences. Since Mr. Devaraj Urs was way behind, before my time, and I'm sure even Sourav's, a little glimpse into the leader. So we don't know anything much about him than what we've read, a little bit about his land policies. But about the person, if you can give us some insight into the person that Devaraj Urs was, the statesman that he was.
He was a man, extremely intelligent man, who was also a winning personality. I experienced this myself, but more importantly, many people in government, in politics in Karnataka, experienced this. He was when he would get up on the public platform and give speeches to villagers, to people in cities, he was always entertaining. He had a good sense of humor, which he projected very well. And I attended some of these rallies, and I've seen the people who responded remarkably well in these cases, and he would have them laughing. He would poke fun at his opponents. He would say things to win them over and to build bridges between the different groups, very different groups in his coalition of support, Dalits, scheduled castes, that is to say, OBCs, Muslims, and others. He was very good at building bridges, at giving people who were in his cabinet and his party significant powers to do things for themselves and their supporters. He was a generous, intelligent, and hugely lovable character. I remember I had a private conversation with the governor of Karnataka, another highly intelligent person, at the time that Devaraj Urs was struggling with trouble with Sanjay Gandhi and Indira Gandhi in the late 1970s. And the governor kept saying that the people love Devaraj Urs, and they did. And I think all of those things made him, helped him to succeed politically, but as a human being, he was something very special. I know Mr. Siddaramaiah much less well, so I'm not. I had long times traveling and meeting with Devaraj Urs, so that I'm not quite the expert you need on Siddaramaiah as a man.
So, but since you've tracked Karnataka's politics from a relatively stable era during Devaraj Urs to the other turbulent times where we've had multiple coalitions, multiple chief ministers over short terms, do you see that changing in Karnataka, or do you think Karnataka's political volatility is part or is it in its nature itself?
Well, politics in Karnataka are volatile in as much as no ruling party has been re-elected since 1985. That's an astonishingly long spell of failure by governments to get re-elected. And that's partly because it's so difficult to get so many wide-awake interest groups together and keep them together in your support base. Karnataka has part of the volatility we see within governments and between periods in government. Part of that volatility is explained by poor leaders, poor semi-competent politicians being chief minister, politicians who overplay their hand, like Mr. Bangarappa did, for example, politicians who are simply utterly ill-equipped to be a chief minister, as with Mr. Gundu Rao, politicians also who ask things of their civil servants and their ministers, which are completely impossible because they don't have a realistic understanding of what the limitations of what governments can do. And I would include in that category Mr. Yediyurappa big time. I think he was naive and radically unrealistic at his time as chief minister. And I think his governments suffered as a result, that his governments failed to get reelected as a result. So it's part of the story is that there have been chief ministers who are not up to the job, but some chief ministers who've been reasonably good have still lost elections. And I think Mr. Bomai, I think S.M. Krishna were not bad chief ministers, but they getting reelected in this state with these highly sophisticated voters and needing huge coalitions to get reelected. These things are very tough, even for good chief ministers to achieve. And the other, I would just say one other thing. Karnataka had one really good chief minister whose time was cut short by events and who might have been a rather different, he might have survived, got reelected, and that was Mr. Devagowda, who I think his time was cut short for remarkable reasons. He became prime minister, but even he might have struggled to gain re-election within the state.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, Professor Manor.
Thank you. Good luck to you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your time.